Have you been practicing toxic spirituality, but you don't know it? I know that I did. Stay tuned. It is Unsermon, episode number 2 with Kat Kim. Last week in our first pilot episode, I shared with you guys my journey going from a crack addict and a drug dealer facing 3 years in state prison to where I am now as a spiritual teacher and a leadership coach. I shared with you guys this passion, or you can call it an obsession. You can also call it an addiction. Let's just call it what it was. I had this obsession around transformation. I was obsessed about learning, how do we create the thing that we want on the outside? Like, how do we create transformation the fastest and the easiest? And this has really been the journey that I've been on for so many years now, since that moment where I decided that I wanted to actually become and be the woman that I wanted to be. I wanted to be beautiful. I wanted to be powerful. I wanted to be impactful. I wanted to transform lives and make a difference. And the moment that I declared that for myself, the moment that I stepped into my calling and said, yes, this is what I want, I went on this journey of trying to discover, okay, if this is the thing that I want, how do I make that happen? And I talked about this in episode 1. If you guys weren't there, go back and watch it, because what happened is something that I did not expect. This quest for transformation on the outside kept taking me deeper and deeper inside. This obsession about finding the source of all things essentially led me to God, to spirit. And this is not what I was expecting. It's not what I wanted. But when I started this spiritual journey and I committed to it, I realized that I couldn't just stop where I was just getting all the things that I wanted. And what I began to see just in the world, and also with my clients, and I've worked with people all across the board. I've worked with millionaires who own wineries, buildings, land, businesses, and I've worked with people who don't have any money. And it was this interesting thing that I began to notice. No matter who I was working with, no matter where they were on the socioeconomic scale, no matter where they were coming from, no matter what their history and their experiences were, it all came down to one thing, that they felt like they did not have enough. That either, one, they didn't have enough like resources, money, time, or they felt like they weren't enough. They weren't respectable enough. They weren't getting enough love or attention or acknowledgement. They just felt like they were not worthy of doing the thing that they wanted. Does this resonate with you guys? Have you guys ever felt this? I know for certain that so many people are feeling these things. I know that I do. And this is just because I'm a spiritual teacher and I'm a leadership coach does not exclude me from having these feelings. I still have these feelings. And what I noticed is that it all boiled down to one thing. It was this feeling of lack and scarcity. And what I realized is that our culture is tormented by lack and scarcity. No matter how much money we have, no matter what we've accomplished in this world, no matter what we've done, no matter how much success that we have had, we are constantly feeling like we are not enough and that we don't have enough. We are consumed by these feelings of lack and scarcity. And I began to question this. I was like, why is this happening? You know, supposedly we're supposed to be one of the most prosperous countries in the world, supposedly. We have access to the most resources, yet we are consumed by these feelings of not having enough. And we're constantly seeking more, whether it's more money, more recognition, more things, right? There's this constant like seeking and needing and desiring of more and more and more. And what I began to see is that not only are we consumed by these feelings of lack and scarcity, but that we live in a culture, a consumer culture, where materialism and, tangible like success, like attaining more wealth and more fame, that these things are not only encouraged, but they are glamorized. And so we live in a culture that's constantly telling us that in order to be okay, in order to be successful, that you need to continuously consume and consume and consume, and not just consume, but produce and produce and produce. So we are stuck in this vicious cycle of producing and consuming and producing and consuming. Does this resonate with you guys? Have you guys seen this out there? Let me know in the comment box. Do you guys see this kind of perpetual toxic cycle that we're all caught up in, of this need to constantly produce and produce? Like, we need to create something, we need to do more, we need to work more, we need to create more. And then consuming, like, we need to get more, we need more money, we need more information. Oh my God, information. I am just now recently going on like an information detox where I have stopped reading all these crazy books. But even that is a form of kind of toxic consumption where I kind of felt like I have to consume something. I need something. I need to bring something into me in order to feel fulfilled and okay. And I realized that because we're in this cycle, this vicious cycle, and this crosses political lines, you guys. This has nothing to do with the left. This has nothing to do with the right. This is a system. This is a culture that we are all participating in. I don't care how much you say that you are anti-capitalist or anti-whatever, but let me tell you something. Everybody in this Western world is benefiting from this culture of production and consumption and production and consumption. Of course, at the same time, we are suffering from it, but it's both. We're suffering from it, but we're also benefiting from this culture of consumer capitalism. And, you know, so we have to take a hard look, a really hard look at the culture of consumerism that we live in. And also, where does it come from? Why are we here? And this requires that we really take a hard look at the system of extractive capitalism that we live in. And let me tell you something. This is not about pointing fingers, y'all. I am not pointing fingers at one party, one person, one group, one corporation, none of that. This is a culture of extractive capitalism that we are all participating in, and that we are all being harmed by, and that also that we are benefiting from. So when I began to see all of this happen, I really had kind of a wake-up call, and I had to ask myself the really, really hard question. If this is going on, and I see this culture of consumerism that's really harming people, how am I contributing to that? And what am I willing to do to not be a part of that? And that was a really, really, really difficult question to ask myself, because firstly, I realized that I was contributing greatly to the culture of consumerism, not just by like my own personal desires and wants for, you know, a multi 6 or 7 figure business. Not that that's wrong, but I'm just saying, like, think about where our mind is and what we're constantly chasing after. I realized that I was that person that was perpetually unfulfilled and constantly wanting more and more and more. And I couldn't be happy with where I was, regardless of the incredible things that I have accomplished and that I have done. And so I know that this is the case for so many of you. And, you know, when we ask these hard questions, I began to realize, one, that I was also, not only was I preaching and teaching these, you know, this idea that you can get whatever you want as long as you stay focused and as long as you stay positive. But I was also just putting it out there in the world that this was what spirituality was about. Like, that spirituality is about just manifesting what you want, and that all you have to do is think positive and you know, not focus on the negative stuff, right? But just stay positive. And if you do that, create a vision board, do your visualizations and do your meditations, then everything will be okay. Have you guys been through that? Have you guys been through that yourself? Have you been through that cycle of like spirituality where you're just learning, like, okay, if I just think positive, then this is all I need to do? I know for so many people that, you know, spirituality has become really mainstream, and I'm not saying that that's bad. It's like it was the time for spirituality to become mainstream, and there were many positive things that came from this movement. However, we are now being called to deepen. We are now being called to deepen our spiritual practice and look beyond just ourselves, and to also really question the systems that we're operating under, and to really question if we're operating under toxic extractive systems that are really about just extracting as much as they can from everyone below. Are we contributing to that? And are we using spirituality to do that? And that's what this conversation is about today. It's about toxic spirituality. Are you practicing toxic spirituality and you don't even know it? I know I was, and it was a mind fuck. It really hurt for me to realize what I was doing and what I was learning and what I was regurgitating and putting back out there in the world. And I realized that if I want to call myself a spiritual person and really be dedicated to a spiritual path, I realized that I need to go deeper. I need to do more than that. And I took a step back from my business. I took a step back from everything because, you know, coming across this information and this realization just it turned my world upside down, because it really made me question like who I was and who I was being, and to realize that I was potentially harming other people, and, you know, and not really understanding the deeper implications of this idea of whatever you can think and whatever you can, you know, want, that you can create and you can make. I wasn't thinking about the implications of that and how it actually harms us as a global community. So I wanted to talk about what came from that. I ended up taking a break and I wrote an essay called Consumer Spirituality, the Mainstream Pop Culture Spirituality of Today. It was essentially, consumer spirituality is essentially trains us to be better consumers. It's the mainstream pop culture spirituality of today that trains us to be better consumers and inadvertently perpetuates blind conformity to the dominating and oppressive structures of consumer capitalism. So I want to go over the 4 parts of consumer capitalism, or consumer spirituality, and what they are. So there are 4 things that consumer spirituality does. Number 1, it appropriates and commodifies ancient spiritual teachings. So it cherry picks the positive aspects of ancient spiritual traditions. It packages and sells them so that it's easily palatable by the Western world. So essentially, this results in cultural theft and really diluted spiritual teachings that only teach us to feel good in the moment rather than to actually do good or be good. Number 2, consumer spirituality promotes self-interest and personal development over all else. So who's been here before? I know I have. I'm very transparent about my journey. I know I've been here, and I know I'm here a lot, actually. So spirituality is offered not as a way to alleviate collective suffering and create social change, but as a way to become more personally productive, wealthy, comfortable, and efficient. Oh my God, that one hurts. I'm not saying that you can't use spirituality for this and that you shouldn't. Of course you can, but let's think about the implications of what a spiritual journey means for you if this is what it's all about. And this is what I began to see, not just in my circles, but all over. Number 3, consumer spirituality teaches us to be relentlessly positive and to seek pleasant emotional experiences at all costs. What does this mean? It means that uncomfortable human emotions such as anger, grief, fear, rage, all of those were labeled, they were shunned and labeled as low vibe, and they were cast as the opposite of spiritual enlightenment. This is what consumer spirituality does. It tells us that if we're not always positive and high vibe, I can't tell you how much those words irk me, high vibe, then you're doing spirituality wrong, and that something's wrong with you and that you need to be fixed. How often have you guys felt that? I know that this is something that goes on with so many people, that when you feel like you're not positive and you can't stay positive and you're feeling negative and stuck, your blocks are coming up, you feel that, okay, I must be doing spirituality wrong. Something's wrong with me because for some reason, I can't stay in a positive, pleasant place all the time. Consumer spirituality, number 4, the 4th thing that it does is that it encourages overconsumption and materialism. It preaches and it teaches that the universe is infinite, so we can manifest whatever we want. However, when this spiritual principle is married to consumerism, we end up reinforcing the vicious cycles of overconsumption that perpetuate poverty, racism, inequality, corruption, and environmental degradation around the world. That is something that we need to come to terms with. Are you guys following me? Give me a comment in the comment box. Tell me yes if this resonates with you. Consumer spirituality encourages overconsumption and materialism. I'm just going to repeat this. It emphasizes that the universe is infinite, okay? Infinite. So we can manifest and we can have whatever we want as long as we stay focused and we think positive. But when this spiritual law and principle is married to consumerism, it ends up perpetuating the vicious cycles of poverty, racism, inequality, corruption, and environmental degradation around the world. I began to see that consumer spirituality, the mainstream pop culture spirituality of today, is essentially designed for the privileged, affluent Western world, and that includes all of us for the most part. It is something that we are able to do because here in the Western world, we are not faced with poverty face to face. Of course, there are many pockets, many areas in America now that do, but for the most part, people who are listening to this right now, who are listening to me in this Unsermon, I know that you are in a place of privilege. For you to be able to hear and listen to this, that you are not in a place of absolute poverty. And because we don't see that, because we don't face that face to face, it is easy for us to say, oh, well, all you have to do is think positive. All you have to do is, create a vision board and meditate. And, if you do that, then you don't have to, then you will be able to create whatever you want. I realized to my dismay that not only was I practicing and preaching consumer spirituality, but that I was telling people that, just thinking positive and doing all those things would be like the cure-all to all of your problems. That is when I decided that I need to take a hard look at myself and what I'm doing. And this is the conversation that I want to bring up for you guys today. Are you guys practicing consumer spirituality? Are you guys practicing toxic spirituality? Answer that to yourselves. Is this something that you have felt yourself doing? But I just want to be really very clear that you're not doing this because you're a bad person, okay? I'm not a bad person. We are not bad people. But what we have to do, if we are leaders in this new emerging world and we are stepping into our calling, we must look at the overarching system, the system of extractive capitalism, the system of toxic masculinity that has not only brainwashed us, but has, that has swept us all in and that now we are part of and we are contributing to. And the questions that you got to ask yourself, are really difficult. You got to ask yourself, am I willing to break the status quo? Am I willing to not be part of this in a way that feels right for me? And so asking myself those questions has been a very deep journey. it's been very difficult for me to see myself in that way, where I realized that I was just being, you know, willfully participating in this. And it came to that point where I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to not be part of this? What is my role in this? How am I going to be part of dismantling this part of spirituality and deconditioning, undoing what I have learned about the consumerist culture, what I have learned about spirituality, and what I have learned about my role in all of this. So these are the questions that I want you guys to ask yourself, and really think deeper about who you are being called to be as a spiritual leader. Let's put it this way. It's not that difficult. There is a method and there is a solution to this. And instead of practicing consumer spirituality, there is non-conformist spirituality. And what I discovered about non-conformist spirituality is so amazing. And it did require me to move outside of my spiritual teachers like Abraham Hicks and kind of like that mainstream pop culture literature on just thinking positive. And I began studying people like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And Matthew Fox. I started reading about other spiritual teachers. And I started posting about this too. You guys might remember it. A lot of people weren't happy to hear me make a comparison between Law of Attraction and Abraham Hicks and Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm not saying, I'm not pointing just my fingers at Abe Hicks. I'm just comparing what Law of Attraction and Abraham Hicks represents, because I know that Abe Hicks has done wonders and it has been amazing. They're doing their role, but let's deepen what our spiritual practice can look like, and let's expand who we learn from and really pay attention to who our spiritual teachers are. Yes? All right. How are you guys doing so far? I see these wonderful comments. Someone is saying, my friend and I were talking about this the other day in connection with sickness. I can't make my legs work, but just because I want them to over and over and over and try to manifest working legs, sometimes disease is disease. Yes, that's right. And there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, this is why I'm doing this, is because people begin to think, oh, there must be something wrong with me because I can't make this thing happen. I must be doing spirituality wrong. There are so many reasons for why we experience pain and suffering in this world, and they are not just about what you think. I know that's the common thing that people are teaching, but I am here to tell you it is not just what you think. You do not think in a silo. Hello? What is spirituality about? It's about our connection to one another. It's about our connection to one another. That means that what I think and what my ancestors think and what my family thinks, that all impacts me. It also, my community and the country that I live in, all of it. We're all in this big, huge mixing bowl. You do not think in a silo. Of course, you have your independence, but you also are interdependent on one another. So what you think is not just what you create. And I talk about this. I go deeper in The Secret to the Secret. If you're interested in that, I go really, really deep into why, Law of Attraction teachings don't work for everybody. There's generational trauma. There's ancestral trauma. There's racial trauma. There is so much trauma, physical, mental, emotional trauma, that you can't just think away. So can we give ourselves permission to not just to let go of the idea that if I just think positive, then I can do things? It doesn't work that way. Of course, there's truth in that, but it doesn't work that way. There's so much more. There's so much within our unconscious, subconscious mind that is coming up for us, that is being shown to us that we need to heal. And that doesn't come by just bypassing it and looking past it and creating vision boards and thinking positive. Vision boards and that type of thing works for things that we do not have big emotional attachments to. But for the things that we have been really harmed by, the things that we have trauma around, those things require deeper work, deeper work. So we are all on that journey right now. It doesn't matter if it's you regarding money or your body, or society, culture, all of these things. We are all being called into a deeper spiritual practice right now. So I'm going to leave it with this. I want to let you know that in our next episode, we're going to talk about what non-conformist spirituality is. And I swear to God, I did not plan this, but next week is Martin Luther King Day. And it just so happens that the Unsermon that I want to do is absolutely inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King, who is one of my favorite spiritual teachers. So stay tuned for that next week. We are going to continue this conversation about toxic spirituality. And if we're not practicing toxic spirituality, then what are the other options? Stay tuned for next week's Unsermon. See you guys soon.